Good day to all of you and greetings. First off, I would like to say thank you for being here. You could be anywhere else, but you choose to be here. And for that, and I salute all of you, for learning about, wanting to learn more about auction properties. Second of all, I would like to say thank you very much to the Star Property for giving me this opportunity to speak about something that is dear to my heart, which is auction properties. Now, before I go into all the details about auction properties, is it all right if I share a little bit on myself and a disclaimer as well? Now, today, as I say, the topic for today is 7 legal tips for auction properties and the processes involved from the start until the end for auction properties. A little bit of a disclaimer first. All right. Any and all information shared during this webinar is solely for education and information purpose only, and is no substitute for legal advice. Secondly, if you have any legal issues involving auction, I strongly recommend you to seek your legal advisor, which is also your lawyer as well, so that they can advise you further on what to do next. Now, my name is Alfred Chong, and I am a lawyer. I've graduated from UWE, Bristol, England, and thereafter I got the certificate of legal practice. I was working for other lawyers for 10 over years before I set up my own practice in 2017, and thereafter I've been working for myself since then until now. And my field of practice includes conveyancing we do factories as well as shop lots. We also do as well, so housing and a lot of auction properties as well, matters. Aside from that, I'm also very active in court. We also assist a lot of celebrities as well as speakers and also high profile individuals as well for various matters. Now, aside from being a lawyer, I am also a speaker. I've actually had the opportunity, which I'm very grateful for, to be able to speak at the Stars Property Fair in KL, Selangor, and Johor as well. So prior to this, before the COVID period, I was actually also in one of those Ask Me legal questions on property as well, which was organized by the Star. And during the MCO period, I was also active at home, sharing on property-related and legal-related issues as well. Now, this is what I would like to emphasize on is your lawyers are your legal advisors and the facilitators. Legal advisors would be there to advise you on the risks involved and also the steps and procedures for each procedures. And when I say facilitators, I mean that we make it easier and make the process faster involving property transactions, loan transactions, as well as to seek justice in court as well. Now, this is something that's dear to my heart. Have you all heard of Robert Kiyosaki? Robert Kiyosaki is a very famous author who wrote the book known as Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he's actually talked about how it is possible for people, normal people, everyday people to amass a great fortune. So one of the things he did say that inside his book is that rich investors take risks. So as lawyers, our job is actually to advise you on all the risks and all the pitfalls involved so that you can make well-informed decisions. When I say well-informed decisions, I mean that you take into factor all the risks involved, but you also look at all the benefits there as well. And then you make an informed decision. Now, this is also another very dear author that is dear to my heart. Dale Carnegie. Dale Carnegie said this. He said that 90% of millionaires make their money by property. They do so by investing in property. Now, I have seen this from my own experience because my family is actually in the property sector. My grandfather and grandmother used to buy properties. And thereafter, they had during this period in time, they keep every time they had extra money, they will just buy more properties and buy more properties. They will save the money and all that. So when after a while, they actually amassed of, at that point in time, property was much more cheaper. Or anyone who asks you, they will say that the best time to buy property is yesterday. The second best time to buy property is today. So at that point in time, the property's price was cheaper. And at that point in time, my grandmother and my grandfather first, and then thereafter my grandmother, they keep on keeping money, saving money, and they keep on purchasing properties. Thereafter, the property, they were mostly rubber plantation at that point in time, right? Slowly, that area became known as Kuchai Lama. And thereafter that, my grandmother actually had the opportunity to join venture with Berjaya, Tan Sri Vincent Tan, and they actually did a few projects. They did a project there, sorry, not a few, just one. But yeah, so that, and aside from that, they also, after that, my family side actually ended up a few JVs with other developers to set up a few shop lots as well as buildings in that place, aside from condos as well. So I can be, when I tell you that, I've seen people who have made money in that field. I'm not, so I've seen it from my own eyes as well. So I'm actually sharing based on the experience that I have, not based on what people is telling me and all that as well. Now, before I go into all that, let me just share that the benefits of investing in properties is that we have a very good legal system, which is based on the British legal system. Second of all, we follow Torren system from Australia when it comes to land law. So what does this mean, Alfred? It just means that that anything that is, it involves the registration of properties and the interest therein at the land registrar. So as long as your rights is registered in the land properties itself, it is indefeasible. Now, what does indefeasible means? Now, indefeasible says that it confers title or interest on you the moment that it's registered. There is a very famous decision that says it's a federal court decision. He said that, where the judge actually said that under the Torren system, the register is everything. That means is that if you have registered your rights in the registrar, the land registrar, I'm referring to the land registrar, then in that scenario, then your property, with your rights in the property is assured. That means is that as long as we do, so what we do when we are, for us lawyers, right, when we go to when we want to ascertain whether you're owner or not, we'll request for a copy of the title. So you normally, what will happen is that the land office will issue you a title whereby your name is registered there. Now, anyone who wants to confirm whether or not you are the rightful owner of that property, they can go and apply for a land search. When they go to the land office and they pay the registration fee for a land search, a private land search that is, that way they would then be able to determine whether or not you are the owner of that property. The land office will issue a land search result, and it will show your the details of the property and who the owner is and what are the transactions involved and what are the interests registered at the land office itself. Now, aside from the National Land Code, property transactions are also governed by the Contracts Act. This is expressive, and as well as the housing development regulation. This is very important when you are buying for developers itself. For sub-sales, when there is no, the property has not, there's no strata title or individual title yet, then Contract Act is very important. You need to rely on your contract, on the Contract Act first, and then thereafter, when the title is issued, then only the National Land Code will apply. In this type of situation, right, it is normally when you buy from developers and all that, right, they would normally issue you Schedule H S&P. So this, which is already prescribed by law. So normally when you buy firsthand, right, all the S&P are the same. Now, moving on, aside from that, what law is applicable are stamp duties. So every time when you purchase a property, you will also have to pay stamp duty for the registration of the title in your name. Aside from that, and once you sell off the property, then you need to pay real property gain tax as well. Now, a lot of people ask me, Alfred, why should I invest in auction property? I mean, there is such I can get properties from the developers, which is protected by the housing development regulation, especially as their S&P is prescribed by Schedule H. And second of all, Alfred, I could just go and I could go for sub-sales. Both of these would be better, wouldn't it, than for auction properties? Yes, you are right. Auction properties is the third, not so famous or most choice. Well, I mean, it is the third choice that normally people don't talk about. When many people ask you to buy a property, they will be in their mind, they are talking about purchase from the developer, or they're talking about sub-sale. However, if you look at this chart here, you can see that the price of properties are soaring. Now, why is this happening right now? Is that right? If you're going to buy from developers now, a lot of them, right, they are having a headache right now. The developers are having a headache. You see, what happened is that during the MCO period, which is and then after now, right, the price of materials, right, have increased, and logistics as well. If you remember, recently there was a war that started in February as well. That also has affected the price of oil. Now, when the price of oil increase, right, what happens is that it affects logistics. When the price of logistics increase, it also naturally increase the price of the cost of construction material. Now, I haven't mentioned this, but steel is also getting very, very expensive. So in this type of scenario, right, so when you buy from developers, now most developers also have to factor in the cost of all these materials. So when they sell to you, they will be selling to you the price of, they won't be selling you at the new projects, especially, right? They will be selling to you at a future price, not at the current value of the price. They may be selling to you maybe at the price that of the property is 2 years later, or 3 years later, or maybe even sometimes 5 years later. And even worse, some may even factor in 10 years later price. So that means the price of property will increase as well. Now, and when the price of property increase as well, that is going to affect the sub-sales as well. So as I said, the price of properties are rising. That is one. Two, now when you say why do you want to invest in loan properties, there is a lot of loan defaults. Okay, well, now that means is that last time you would say that there's not much choice, Alfred. You say, Alfred, I could, I want to invest, but I don't. But now, due to a lot of loan defaults, this is due to which is due also to the COVID-19 as well, and the effects of COVID-19. It has also affected a lot of sectors. And as a result, during this period of time, after the moratorium has ended itself, right, a lot of people struggle to make payment. So for those who are unfortunate, or those who have already defaulted prior to the moratorium period, that the banks will now take action to auction off all the properties. Now, during this period, so that gives a lot of choices. Last time they say, when they think of auction properties, they're thinking of properties in old properties, or properties that are not so new. But there are many people who have also defaulted in the new projects as well as the old projects. And this has resulted in more and more auction properties. There's a huge choice of auction properties available now. Lastly, why should you invest in auction properties? It's because, right, you are buying it at a discount. When I say that you're buying it at a discount, I'm saying that when the bank auction off your properties, right, what they will do is that they will issue you a notice for that you have defaulted in payment, but if you fail to pay up the installment as required, they will issue you a notice to terminate the loan agreement, whereby then they will get if there's a title, they will then proceed to go and get a court order, or they will proceed straight off the auction. Now, before they go to auction, right, they have to sell it off. They will get the valuer to come up with a forced market sale value. Now, what is a forced market sale value? A forced market sale value, right, is value that is given for properties that is to be sold immediately. In this type of scenario, right, what will happen is that the valuer will knock off for the first auction, they will knock off up to 20% for the property itself. So imagine this, if the property is worth 1 million, you can actually get it at 800,000. Or if the property is 500,000, you can now get it at 400,000. And that is only for the first auction. So sometimes maybe they fix a date that is not popular. You know, the property cannot is not auctioned off by the first auction. So then the banker will have to fix a second auction date, and then they will have to go back to the valuer, and the valuer will then come up with a second forced sale value that is now below market price. So they will shave off another 10% or up to 20%. So in this type of scenario, right, some of your properties, right, there's already a 20% discount, and on top of that, another 20% or another 10% discount. And this one will keep on going. So by the third auction, there will be another forced market sale value again. If it is not, the property is not auctioned off, there were no successful bidder, and there were no bidders. And in this type of scenario, right, then the bank will have to wait again, another date for them to sell the property. So if for this type, now, this is a very good reason to buy an auction property, because from the point of the buyer, they're already getting a discount, one. Two, it'll be easier for them to get a loan, because if you were to get a 90, no, normally for, let's just say I'm talking about housing involving a residential property. For residential property, right, you can get up to 90% loan. So let's just say, would it be easier to get a 90% loan on a 1 million property, or would it be easier to get a 90% loan on a 800,000 property? The answer would be 800,000 property. Now that is one. That is the second reason already. Now the third reason that I want to share about is that for the forced sale value is this. Buyers, and it's easier, not only is it easier for them to get a loan, because then their loan is approved, right? But lastly, the buyer actually makes money. So normally, you know, for people, when it comes to investment, right, they'll say for property, you only make money 5 to 10 years later, because that during that period in time, right, the value of the property will increase. Now here, when you buy a property at 800,000, when it's worth a million ringgit, right, you already make 200,000. So for example, if 2 or 3 years down the road, you were to sell off the property, right, even at the value that it was worth at 1 million, you already make 200,000. So that is the example that I want to share. So in this type of scenarios, right, it is better to invest in auction properties. Because of all these reasons, the price of new properties are soaring, there are more options available, and lastly, you can get it at a forced sale value, which is below market price. Now, aside from that, right, this is also a secure investment protected by law. Now, do you remember what I told you about the Malaysian follow the Torren system? Now, actually, your auction, if there's a title in the property, right, the auction is actually governed by the National Land Code itself. So if there is no title, I mean the strata title or the individual has not been issued yet, then you have to go back to your loan agreement with the bank. So, but mostly for this type of cases, there will be and it will be is very heavily regulated. So that means is that once you purchase the property, right, you can rest assured that that property will belong to you. And this is only one of the few investments whereby bank is ready to give a loan for the investment itself. So that's why I say up to 90% finance can be given depending on whether or not you fulfill all the criteria. This is for residential property. Then this is also for commercial as well as agriculture property. There is also option as well. So you need to, as a first-time buyer or as a seasoned investor or someone in the middle, right, option property is one of the choices that you may not have looked at previously, which you may want to look at now. Now, the sixth reason is that you are buying ready-built properties. So the moment you purchase the property, right, you can straight away go and find a tenant. So once you make the payment and all that, and you are the beneficiary after you have made the payment, After that, they will proceed to do the transfer of title, right? You are already entitled to go and look for a tenant. I mean, in these type of scenarios, right? I mean, provided that there are there is no occupiers there. So if it is not it is not occupied in these type of scenarios, right? You can actually proceed to find a tenant. And so if you're getting a loan from the bank, then you can actually find someone to help to pay part of the loan, depending on how much money that you pay for the auction. If you buy well below market value, you can actually make a profit as well, because then the market value for a tenant there would be much more than the loan that you would have to get if you would apply for the loan. In other words, once you get the financing, you can actually find a tenant, and then he would then be able to assist you to cover the rental involved. Now, let's go through the auction process so that at least this, for all those who are new to this, they can actually just get an idea in their mind. And as well, this may be a revision for those seasoned investors, or maybe you're not familiar at all as well. You're just very familiar with the last part. Now, what happens when there's a loan default? Now, what will happen is that your banker will send you letters to remind you of a default in the loan. Then if you still fail to remedy the default, then the bank will then be forced to, if there is no title, then they will proceed to they will issue a letter of demand for the full amount, or not under the statute, under the NLC, they are supposed to issue a notice for the full amount, and then ask you to give you a month time to pay out the loan amount in full, including interest. If you are able to pay out, then there's no issue. Now, most of the defaulters will not be able to pay out. In this type of scenario, then they will straight away apply for an order for sale. Now, they will proceed under an OS, and with the supporting affidavit, then they will include all the details inside, whereby they will then specify that you have breached, then they have complied with all the requirements under the National Land Code. In this type of scenario, right, it is very hard to contest this type of cases whereby the borrowers default on the loan. And so the bank will normally get a court order for sale very easily. Even if you challenge it, it is a bit difficult, because having gone through it, I can share with you the experience of assisting my clients as well. Now, third of all, then, after they get a court order, which is they will list out all the order, they will then appoint a valuer. His job is then to value the property and come up with a false market value, which, as I said before, is below the market value itself. False sale value, sorry. Now, once that is done, right, then they will come up with a proclamation of sale. The proclamation of sale would be it's like an S&P. It would be your contract. They will come up with it. They will draft up the proclamation of sale, which will then be approved. And thereafter, then they will give notice and advertise the proclamation of sales in the newspaper and other in the gazettes and all that as well. Thereafter, right, there will be a date that will be fixed for auction. Now, during the auction, as long as you bring there is a fixed price there. So when I say fixed price there, normally let's just say the property is auctioned off at 800,000, right? You need to prepare a minimum of 10% of the value of the property for the auction itself. So for example, you will need to bring an 80,000 check, then that to be paid to the auctioneer itself. Then thereafter, if you are the highest bidder at that point in time, you will be able to then sign a contract of sale after the bidding is over, and thereafter then you start the ball rolling. Normally for this type of cases where it involves a court order and there is a title involved, normally it's 120 days. Whereas if there are no individual title or strata title, in these type of scenarios, right, normally it could be 90 days up to 120 days. It really depends on the bank. As I said earlier, if there were no strata title or individual title, then you really need to go back to the terms and conditions of your loan agreement, and whereby they will list out all the steps involved as well, and the rights of the bank as well. Now, Before we go into all the tips, I would just like to say that there are some risks involved for auction properties. And auction properties, right, sometimes are occupied by previous occupants and they refuse to vacate the property. So after you buy the property, you will find that sometimes, I mean, if you don't do your due diligence and all that, there are occupants there and they refuse to move out. Now, I will share more about this later on, but there is the risk that is there. And you would then have to proceed to apply for a court order to then evict them. And that way you will incur legal charges as well, legal fees. You can just go and seek legal advice. Normally, if your lawyer is good enough, they will be able to issue a letter of demand. And then after that, negotiate the occupants to move out on your behalf. If not, then you have, if all alternative fails, then you are looking at either evicting your previous tenant, occupant. Now, when I say tenant, you can also, if all else don't work, you can also convert your occupant, the previous occupant, into a tenant. And you can inform him you are the new owner, and then maybe you can come up with a deal whereby then the tenant, the occupant will then pay for rental. You sign a new tenancy agreement as well. Now that is called converting this risk into an opportunity. Okay. Now, aside from that, there are certain properties that have massive debts. They incurred massive debts in. We're talking about. We're talking about assessment and quick rent that were not paid, right? And then the amount that is auctioned is insufficient to cover everything. So there is also a risk involved. Lastly, there is also a chance that you may lose your deposit if the transaction cannot be completed on time. So for example, if you have paid a 10% of the purchase price, which is, as I said earlier in the earlier example, 80,000, and then within the time frame of 120 days, for whatever reason, you are not able to secure the loan and the bank is not able, the bank solicitors are not able to advise release, or they advise release, or but for whatever reason, the bank refuses or it delays in issuing the balance purchase price. In this type of scenario, what will happen is that, now what will happen to you is that the auctioneer solicitors have all rights to go and terminate the auction, the proclamation of sales, contract of sales, and thereafter, right, proceed to auction off the property again. Now, having said that, right, if you have a good lawyer with you and a good loan solicitors, right, they will be able to work hand in hand to be able to ensure that this type of scenario does not happen. However, if it does happen, your lawyer will be able to proceed to court to file for an extension of time. Now, if this was not a property that involves a court order or doesn't involve the land administrator, in these type of scenarios, right, it is possible for your bank to give you an extension of time. Now, a good tip would be to apply for a loan with the same bank that auctioned off the property. So normally the transaction will go a little bit faster because the bank, for them to release from the same bank to the same bank would be much more easier. Now, I would like to share on the first tip. Go through your proclamation of sales. The proclamation of sale is the contract, defines all the terms and conditions to be complied with by the successful bidder. So then you need to look at and make sure that you go through it, see whether or not it is a suitable property. Now, why I say this is because, right, before we go into this, why I say this is because the POS will actually specify what type of property it is. So, and then it will specify what are the details of the property, and then whether or not, for example, is it freehold, is it leasehold? Okay, that's one. Is it consent required? Lastly, you know, it will also specify certain terms and conditions, like can you get back if you were to get a loan, normally you have to pay first for the quick rent and assessment before the bank will be able to advise release. So in this type of scenario, right, will the auctioneer cover all the quick rent and assessment and maintenance charges and all that? So those are the things that needs to be taken into consideration. So how do you get the POS? The POS normally will appear in the newspaper, but if you are, if not, go to your auctioneer, go to the bank solicitor, go to the valuer. They will be able to get a copy of the POS. You can request a POS from the auctioneer or the bank solicitor. They will be the one who will be more than happy to give it to you. Now, again, like I said, you need to read your POS, read through it and go through it in details. You must be very careful. You must check all the details to make sure that you are aware of the details as well. So sometimes the POS will specify certain things that you may not be aware of. And also, they also will specify the address there as well. So you can also, if you are near the area, you can go and inspect the property as well. That is very important as well. Now, when I say just now, the tip, I talk about freehold or leasehold. Now, if you need consent, right, this is a tip that I want to share with you. If you're going to get a loan from the bank, right, the bank will have to get consent. Whereas if this is a property that is involving a court order, whereby that will be sold at the court or it will be sold by the land administrator, in this type of scenario, if there is a leasehold, right, what will happen is that for the transfer itself, from the transfer from the auctioneer bank, from the defaulting borrower to the successful bidder, you do not have to apply for consent for the transfer. This is provided for under the National Bank Code. However, for the loan itself, right, the bank needs to apply for consent, and that will take some time. So if you are really interested in the property and you want to get a loan, then you must quickly, after you get you succeed in becoming the successful bidder and signing the contract, so you must quickly go and apply to your bank, who will then, and you must speed up the process and request and inform them that you need that they need consent, and then get your lawyers to then get the loan solicitors to then go and apply for consent as soon as possible. Now, the second thing you need to see, is it a private auction or is it a court auction or auction by land administrator? I think I've already shared on this point as well. So this is also very important, as I said earlier, because if it is a private auction, you can get an extension of time easier. Whereas if it is a court auction or land auction by the administrator, you have to apply for a court order. And as such, it would be advisable to get someone who is very familiar with auction property to assist in the transfer of name, as well as for the loan factor as well. When I say this, what I'm saying is that it is better to ask if they have got experience with auction property. As I said, developer sales and is more common than auction properties itself. Sub-sales is also more common than auction properties. You need to find someone who has got the experience. If not, then you bear the risk as well. Now, remember that you buy the auction property on an as is, where is basis. So as I said earlier, what does this mean is that you buy it as it is. So what can you do in order to mitigate your risk when it comes to this? So when I say as is, where is basis, I mean that the property is as it is. Whatever is in there or the occupiers are there, it is there. If you have the time, I would suggest that you inspect the property earlier. Look for the defects and also see who are the occupiers there. Lastly, you can also see whether or not, was it abandoned or if it's in bad condition, the property. So this is very, very important. This is the second tip. You also need to conduct, third tip is you need to conduct searches. When you conduct searches, right, on quit rent and assessments, you determine how much is outstanding for the quit rent and assessment as well. So normally for this type of cases, right, you can normally do a search at the land office and at your local municipal. They will be able to, or you can go and get a third party to assist you for this. Before we go into all this, you need to do searches. Why do you need to do searches? Is so that you determine the amount, just in case you're doing a private auction. Sometimes the auctioneer bank does not cover the full amount, and so you will have to pay for the balance quit rent and assessment, aside from other bills as well. Now, this one is a third tip: do a land search. Now, why do I say do a land search? A land search is very, very important. Like I said earlier, for Malaysia, we follow the Torren system from Australia, whereby everything is registered in the land registrar. in Malaysia, whereby if you do pay the necessary registration fee, you can actually find out details about the property. So you determine or not, is there any caveats on the property? Are there any easements? Are there any other interests registered on the property? Is there any lease registered on the property? Are there any details that you have not missed out? So that is not specified in the proclamation of sale. The proclamation of sales only gives you the brief details. I mean, it is a lot already, but it gives you the time when you buy, when the auction will be held, how much the auction property value is, and then after that they will give you certain details like the lawyers. But when you do a land search, right, you can actually determine, you can look in and see if there is a caveat that is going to affect the completion of the property, especially if you have to remove the caveat first. Now, if there are caveats, what can you do? You can do a caveat search. What do you do when you do a caveat search is you go to the land registrar, you pay the necessary registration fee, and then you can actually see what is the reason for the caveat. If there's any by the third party or by the borrower or whoever it is, right, you can find out what is the reason for the caveat. So if it is, and you can also see, was it done by a company or individual, and do they have any legal claim whatsoever? So these are all the due diligence that really needs to be done. If you don't do this right, you run the risk of, when you purchase the property, the time there is a caveat, it could affect if you are getting a loan from the bank, then it will affect the bank in releasing the payment. Okay, if you're paying cash, right, what will happen is that if there is a caveat, then you cannot register the property into your name until you remove the caveat. And if you have to remove the caveat, you can write into the land to the registrar, and then they will write into the person who put in the caveat, and they give notice for him. But if he still refused to, if he replied to say that he has a rights to the property and all that, right, then this matter cannot be resolved, and the matter have to go to court, whereby then you have to file an application to remove the caveat, and that could drag on from 3 to 6 months, sometimes even more, depending. Like, for example, if there was another MCO, touch wood, if there is another MCO, right, it will also affect the court as well, so court applications as well. Now, fourth tip for auction properties is to check whether or not the National Land Code is applicable. Now, as I said earlier, what do I mean by this is that National Land Code is applicable where the strata title or individual title for the property has been issued. Now, you must remember, if it is governed by NLC, right, there is no automatic extension of time. There is, you have to get a court order. That means if the 120 days is not sufficient to complete for payment to be released to the auctioneer bank, then you have to go and get a court order to extend. It is not as of right, and you will also need to, it's a lot of hassle, and you will incur legal fees as well. Now, there was a recent court decision, it's called the Ho Kean Pin's case, and this one, he actually argued that he requested an extension of time because he was affected by the MCO itself. However, in this case, right, the court actually rejected his extension of time, and they actually said that because it failed to safeguard the interest of the defaulting borrower. So in these type of scenarios, right, if you have the time, you are interested, you can go and read up on this case. But what I want to say is that the extension of time is not all the time you will get it. It also in certain, unless you comply with all the requirements, and it's also up to the judge. So the judge also sometimes, this type of cases, the judge will factor in all the details, but he may come up with a different decision. Different judge may come up with different decisions. Now, here, in this case, he was a bona fide purchaser, and as he should have he had to give notice that to the charger and chargee. So as far as the bank was concerned, as far as the court was concerned, he did not provide sufficient notice, and he must also agree to make payment of interest. So in case you want to apply for an extension of time, these are the things that you need to show to the judge. Now, what is the fifth tip for auction properties? It is that for auction properties itself, right, strata property requires consent. Now, consent is only for the loan side. If you're talking about if you're looking at transfer from the defaulting borrower to the successful bidder, you do not need state consent, because there is a section, the National Land Code actually provides a section that allows for the transfer of the property, notwithstanding whether or not there is consent. So that means that even if there is consent required, right, as long as you get it under court order, right, you don't have to apply for consent. The only headache is when if you apply for financing, that's when the bank will then need to apply for consent. Normally, the bank will not release payment unless they have obtained consent. So prior to the title issued, sometimes what will happen is that property will be transferred from by way of deed of assignment. So when you get a loan from the bank, right, there will be, go back to the original contract that you have with the developer, or go back to the subsale, your contract with the subsale, right? And then all your rights will then be as if it is a subsale, then your rights will be assigned to you by the original owner. And thereafter, then you will then have to assign all your rights to the banker in order to get financing. So prior to title issued, then you don't really need to get for consent. But if there is, if it's a strata or leasehold, strata and leasehold, you will need to apply for consent. Now, another scenario is whereby the title is issued, but it was never transferred to the defaulting borrower. Now, in this type of scenario, right, transfer as well as charge will require consent. So what happened was that the title was already issued in the name of the developer, but they were never, then after they never did the perfection of transfer and charge. We call it the perfection of transfer and charge because it perfects the transfer itself and it perfects the charge. That means the owner will, if you look at the land register, it does not reflect the actual owner. So what happens is that developers, when they submit for strata title itself, right? What happens is that it normally is registered in their name, and then the bank, the lawyers are supposed to then proceed to, by way of MOT, to register the property under the name of the defaulting borrower. However, this was not done. And because this stage was not done, so the bank will then proceed to sell. But because they don't, as far as we're concerned, because there is no, this will normally be sold by private auction, but there's already a title out. So sometimes you need to check the POS to see or not, is there a title or not? If a title is issued and is registered in the name of the proprietor or the developer, right? But it's not transferred there, you need to check, second of all, was it or not a leasehold property or not, or a strata property, which requires the state consent. So these are the due diligence that you need to make as well. Now, as I said earlier, refer to section 301 of the National Land Code. Any transfer that is under the NLC, where there is no need for consent, notwithstanding there is a strata title, because section 301 provides for this type of scenario. Okay, but again, like I said, any charge, if there is a charge, we're going into very technical stuff. I'm just saying that these type of things, it is better for you to go and you really need to go and look at the POS, and if possible, get an expert or someone, someone who's very familiar with this stuff, someone who has got a lot of experience dealing with auction properties to help you to go to it. Don't do this alone. I would say that, yes, I would like to qualify whatever I told you earlier to say is that it is much more safer to get a lawyer involved who can help you to facilitate the transaction and help you to go through the details of the POS. Second of all, get your property agent who has got a lot of experience, who have also done auction properties. They will be able to guide you through the whole process as well and go with you to the auction itself, and then guide you through the process and work together with you and your solicitors as well as your loan solicitors to ensure that the transaction goes through itself if you're applying for a loan. Okay. Now, okay. As I said earlier, you really need to get experienced lawyers and other experts who can help you. They loan those who are good with loans, find them. Look for those people who are able to assist you to get loan approvals faster. Go to your bankers who have track records, right? And they are familiar with auction. So you get all these people there, right? You've got your banker, you've got your property agent, you've got your loan solicitors, you've got your solicitors, right? No one can stop you now, unless there are other factors like private caveat and all that, or there is other interest registered. So those type of cases, then yeah, it will be much more difficult. But otherwise, for general auction property cases, right, if you have all these 4 people who are assisting you, or 3 of them, you should be able to get the job done very easily. Now, so I added this in as a joke now. So, pay your solicitors well. If you pay peanuts, you will get monkeys. I hope you enjoy this joke as much as I did. All right. So pay them well, because they will help you. They will do whatever it takes to make sure that the transfer is done, especially those who have got the experience. Now, I want to prepare you that there may be unforeseeable delays when you go and buy auction properties. Sometimes when you buy at the time, you have to deal with developers and the proprietors. There could be loan applications. The loan solicitors may not be familiar with this, or they would ask for unreasonable requests. Or, for example, the developer will not respond slowly. So in this type of scenario, right, you need to get your lawyer's advice when it comes for extension of time. And then after this, and if you get someone with experience, they will be able to deal with unforeseeable issues. That, having done this, I can tell you there are certain issues that is unforeseeable. Bankers issues, there are developers issue, land office issues, and then there's also court issues as well. All of this will affect your auction property transactions. So as I said earlier, make sure you get your solicitors with the experience who are able to assist you with this method. Don't go at it alone. Now, so how do you know whether or not they are good at this, right? So these are the tips that I want to share with you. Ask your lawyers, have you ever done auction properties before? Ask them. If they say yes, then what type of auction properties have you assisted in? So this is the second question. And normally, if they say yes, normally you take it at face value. But when you ask them what type of auction properties, then they will need to give an answer. And then lastly, this is not really a good question to ask. You just say that actually I've putting this in there is not really a good question. Normally you ask them, are they insured as well? So normally if they're insured, you don't have to ask how much, you just ask them, how are they insured, well insured. If they are well insured as well, then you can rest assured that the lawyers will do their job properly as well, also to make sure that to cover each and every transaction as well. Now, the 7th tip for auction properties is that you need to get someone with auction experience. Someone who has done, either find an investor who has bought auction property before and who has done this multiple times, or find a real estate agent who has got auction property experience, or find a lawyer who has got auction property experience, and lastly, a banker who has got auction property experience. All of them together, right, guarantees that you will have a smooth and easy transaction. So ask some questions like, is the property overinflated? Is there someone there who is free, who can pay them if they want fees, pay them to attend with you? Because when you're first time there, you may end up overbidding, you become overheated. So when there's someone there who has got the experience already, right, they can warn you in this type of scenario. They will know, hey, this is above, you are not getting value for what you're buying, then you just back down. And then lastly, there are also syndicates. When I say syndicates, I mean that in certain auction rooms, these are the people who are there all the time. And if they know you're interested in the property, they will ask you for a bribe. If you don't pay the bribe, then what will happen is that they will start bidding more to make sure that when you buy the property, you're going to buy it above the market value. And as such, that it will not be advisable to buy it, or you will incur a loss as well. So lastly, I hope that you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed sharing about this to all of you. So I would like to say that if you have any questions, you can contact me by checking out our website at www.achong.co. You can follow us on our Facebook link, which is www.facebook.com/mrsachong.co. You can follow us on Instagram at mrsachong.co, or you can WhatsApp me at 017-6036-066. I may not pick up your phone call if I receive a call for you because I may be busy, but if you WhatsApp me, then I will try to answer within a reasonable time. I hope you really enjoy yourself and learn as much as I really enjoy myself sharing about this experience to all of you. Thank you very much, and I hope all of you will do well as well. Take care.